Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover Disc Face Off, where we put the discs of various magazines against each other to see who had the best. And today we're looking at September of 1991. And so our contestants are Amiga Action issue 24, Amiga Power issue 5, and the one for Amiga issue 36. Fight! And first up is Amiga Power with a single cover disc. And amazingly, it actually comes with a menu. And we have Barbarian II, which is the only commercial demo that we've got. And then we've got some PD games, like Metagalactic Llamas, X-Fire, which we've seen before, this blank space, and then we have King, Amiga Noids, and Raps. And amazingly, we even have some documentation for some of those games. But let's start off with that commercial demo, Barbarian II. And after a good old bit of decrunching, we arrive at the title screen. Or at least the logo for the publisher, Psygnosis. And once in game, we get to do a bit of messing around with the controls to try and work them out. And it seems that, well, you can do something a bit weird with your head going down towards your crotch. But let's just run around and, hey, we're being attacked. Which is very barbarian. And it didn't take all that much to take him out. Now we're going to try and work out how to pick up whatever this thing is. Oh, no, that's a roll. That's still punching. And it's good old spacebar. Of course it is. Now, I'll admit right off the bat, I've never been a huge fan of Barbarian. It just wasn't a game for me. So, I've not really played Barbarian 2, so I really do not have any idea of what I'm actually doing here. I seem to be just going around, pummeling bad guys, well, I assume they're bad guys, with either my fists or a sword that I've managed to pick up. And every so often, you find these treasure chests. It does feel like a lot of this combat is more trying to get your timing right so you can hit them just before they hit you. And while you do have a bunch of moves, it seems just holding down the fire button and just using the sword seems to get you through a lot of the combat. You also have to be careful with your weapons, as they will deteriorate in use. That's right, Zelda wasn't the first here. And they also had to keep in that classic barbarian staple, cutting off the heads. Now I played this for a good 10 minutes, and to be honest, I think I cleared all the baddies out, but I was no closer to finding an exit, if there even was one in this demo. So I think it might be time to move on to the next game, which if we go by the order on the menu is Metagalactic Llamas. And it's probably not going to come as too much of a shock if I tell you this game was designed by Jeff Minter, even though it was written by someone else. You are quite obviously a llama, and you're currently trying to shoot down these spiders that are falling from the top of the screen. Fail, and, well, the consequences seem to be quite deadly. To aid in your shooting, you can actually raise and lower the ceiling, or at least whatever that bar is at the top. And your shots will actually ricochet off it, so you can try and get it to bounce and hit the spider directly. If you hit their line instead, they'll actually fall from the top, and you'll have to try and shoot them before they land on the ground, as trying to hit them once they're down there is pretty difficult. The goal is quite simple, hit the quota that the level has, and as you can imagine, that number goes up as you go further into the game. Graphically, it doesn't look like a game that would push the Spectrum all that much, let alone the Amiga. Same with the sound. But it is fun to play, though I wouldn't put all that much time into it, I have to say. So let's move on to the next game, shall we? Which is unfortunately X, or Crossfire. Which was a game we got to experience when we checked out those PD discs for the CD32. It was terrible then, it's still terrible now. Your goal is to try and shoot those ghost things that come out the side blocks, but because you only shoot in the direction you're moving in, it's really difficult. And it's just not fun at all. So I'm just going to say it now, let's move on to the next game, which is the card game King's Corner Solitaire. Now I have to admit, I went into this blind and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I'd never played King's Corner before, so yeah, this wasn't going all that well. But thankfully, there was that documentation that was on the main menu, which actually did pretty good at explaining the rules. So after reading about this, I then went back in again to give it a proper go. And what it told me was that you had to put the face cards around the side of the screen in those spaces. But unfortunately, you have to put every single card that you pick up from the deck into a square. In our current mode, we actually have those 4 free spaces in the middle of the screen, where we can place any card that we like. But once a card is placed, it cannot be removed. The only way to get rid of it is by discarding the card. Now obviously you can't just discard any card, instead you can only discard ones that actually add up to 10. So here I was able to get rid of those 2 10 cards because on their own they add up to 10. If I want to discard any of those other ones that are currently in the middle, then I'll need to add them to one other card as such to be able to discard it. But the thing is, as soon as you picked up a card from the deck, you cannot discard any cards at that point. You have to place it or it's game over. Now this game will actually do a pretty decent job of allowing you to play by the rules. It'll not let you discard cards that you can't, and it won't let you place cards where you're not allowed to. Unfortunately, it's not too good at telling you when you've failed. You just have to realise that by just clicking on everything and it not giving you any options at all. Now I have to say, this is a pretty fun card game, and I think this implementation is quite nice. But I think we've pretty much seen all we can of this game, as there really isn't many options, so let's just move on to the next title, which is Amiga Noids. Which is an Asteroids clone to absolutely no one's surprise. If you've seen any version of Asteroids, then you'll know pretty much what you're doing here. You just have to destroy the asteroids, make them smaller. Now you can move around the screen, and you can also use a shield, which is the default option for your special ability, but you can change it to either flip you around or to use a hyperspace. There's even various 2-player modes, so this game actually has a lot of flexibility. And that's actually extended to the graphics, as you can load up different graphical sets. Including this set, which has a My First Deluxe paint drawing vibe to it. But at the end of the day, it is an Asteroids clone, so there's not all that much to talk about. Not unless you add, say, 3D graphics and have a whole tunnel sequence, but no one would do that, so there's nothing else to talk about. So let's just go on to the last game on this disc, which is Raps. Which at first glance looked a little bit like Reversey, but it's not, and it took me a little while messing around with the game and then trying out various settings to work out how you actually play it. That and, well, I checked the manual. So you really got 2 goals here. Either A, you get one of your pieces to the other side of the screen, or you manage to take all of your opponent's pieces. And amazingly, there's even a computer for you to play against. And it knows all the rules of the game, so it will actually tell you if you're trying to make an illegal move, and it will inform you if you've lost or if you've won. Which admittedly was more lose than win, even against the easiest of the AI opponents, but after you get the hang of it, it's not too bad. As the basics of the game is that you can jump one of your pieces to an empty square around it, or jump over one of your own or your opponent's pieces as well. Now if you jump over an opponent, then you actually take it off the board. Now there is also one other rule, and that is, if you can take an opponent's piece, you must take an opponent's, which you can use to your advantage to make sure that your opponent can't make a quick and easy jump to one of the winning squares. There are a few different levels that you can set the difficulty to, and you can even let the computer play itself. And if you try doing that on the harder levels, it will take a while before it takes a move. All in all, it's actually a pretty fun game. I might have to grab it and throw it onto my Amiga 1200, as it looks like it'll run straight from Workbench. And with that game complete, it's time to move on to the next magazine. and it's Amiga Action with 2 cover discs. And if you boot up the first disc, it'll load straight into Zone Warrior, which amazingly they managed to cram the intro into the floppy disk, or at least whatever this bit is that explains the mission. And seeing I've got lots of demos to try out, let's skip over this and just go straight into the level, which might actually be a unique level just for this cover disc, which was quite cool as you got to play levels that you wouldn't do in the final game. And even if you got multiple magazines and they had the same game on it, you would get different levels. Now this appears to be a run and gun style affair, where you have to go through those doors to progress through the map. Now I will admit this is my second attempt at playing this game. As you can see that floor there, well, if you stand on it too long it will vanish. And those platforms show up on the very first screen of the game, and once they're gone, they are gone. So there's no way of making your way further into the game, which is really annoying if you ask me. The rest of the game seems actually quite good. You have to go around rescuing these people, and then trying to find the walls that you can break through and try and make it further on, with everything trying to stop you, obviously. There are weapon upgrades for you to find that, well, you have to land on them absolutely perfectly if you want to get them, and to be honest, after that, I'm not entirely sure what it is you have to do. I don't know if it's just trying to find your way to the exit through the maze, which you can see at the left of the screen there in that map, or if you have to rescue all those people. But instead of going back and rewatching it, I think we'll move on to the next demo, which we know is here by the label on the front of the disc, but is surprisingly tricky to actually load. And if you don't have the instructions, then you might not even know how to get it to start at all. And to do that, you'll need to load up another disc that has Amiga CLI on it, break into it, and then type in Jazz1 Action, which will then load up the Pegasus demo. So yeah, that's not fiddly at all. Now this demo of Pegasus is the hack and slash portion of the game, where you're on foot. And, well, as you can hear, or not hear, it's awfully quiet, which is very strange for a Gremlin game. Now I don't know if they had to remove all the sound and the music to make it fit on the disc, or if this is just what they were given. But the game itself actually seems relatively fun. You jump around collecting gems, and you swipe your sword at the baddies, which in typical form for this type of game will actually show up in front and behind you, and usually in great numbers as well. And I do like that death animation, that hand grabbing you, that is quite cool. And it seems the majority of this game is actually pretty well animated. Just look at all that parallax scrolling going on with the clouds, that's pretty cool. And it seems our health meter is that black bar you can see in the sword, or at least that's what I think it is. Now after Barbarian, there doesn't seem to be all that many moves for you to do. You have your basic swinging the sword around attack, and you've got a screen clearing super attack. And this demo itself is pretty short because this is the boss, and once we defeat them, well, that's pretty much this demo over, and it'll just loop back round and you get to play it again, in complete silence. So at least it's a bit more straightforward than some of the demos we played, but it's also by far the shortest demo that we'll play today as well. And there we go, we just got to run to the end here, and that's it. Level completed. So I guess all that's really left to do is, well, go on to the next floppy disk. And following in the steps of the first disk, this one is also not user-friendly, as you have to know the name of the game to be able to start it. They didn't even include the DIRA command, so you could actually see what's on the disk. So in this instance, I know it's golf, so let's load that up. And this will start Challenge Golf, and I like how it tells us to wang the spacebar. Now I'm sure it'll come as no surprise to those who've seen me that I'm not the biggest fan of sports games. But I have played a bit of golf in the past, or at least computer golf, such as PGA Tour on the Amiga and Golf Story on the Switch. And I get the feeling this is going to be more PGA Tour than Golf Story, as it starts off with this isometric look at the course. And just look at it. And look at it. And look at it some more, because this will stay up for a little while. And once it's finished, you'll get the main game screen, where you can change the angle you shoot at, or you can just hit the mouse button to bring up the power meter. And yep, it's the classic, gotta gauge the power first, and then try and hit in the middle so you don't slice it. And then the game will give you two views of your ball flying. You'll get the straight on view and then the over the head one. Now I have to say, I've seen some shots that look as if they've landed much shorter than what the overhead view has shown afterwards. And before you know it, you're on the green, and then we get this top-down view of the action. It doesn't seem to give you a lot of information of the curve of the green. I also feel it doesn't give you enough information on the power of your shots either. That bar, it just doesn't seem enough. And after more attempts than I'd really like, I finally get the ball in the hole. And yep, that's a bogey. The courses seemed relatively varied as well, with lots of water hazards. And I swear I skimmed the ball off the water there. Look at it go. I don't think that's correct, but I'll take it. And after messing around with the game for a little bit, I finally learned that if you click on your club, it will tell you how far it will go, which gives you a much better idea of what your power range is going to do with those meters. So this was a half-decent looking golf game in that modern style with all the bars, so it's not actually too bad, though the putting could really do with some extra work. So I think it's probably time for us to go on to the final game on this disc, as it's going to take me absolutely ages to make it to the hole, and then even longer for me to finally sink the putt. So what's Amiga Power going to finish with? Well, it's the PD game, Tanks. Anyone that's played Worms will feel right at home with this, though amazingly it does predate that game by a good few years. So its contemporary at this time would probably have been Scorched Earth on MS-DOS. Your goal, if you've not been able to guess it already, is to take out your opponent's tank, and you do that by selecting the angle and speed of your attack. Do it right, and they explode. Now this version is a strictly two-player affair. There's no AI for you to battle against. The game started off as a PD title, but Amiga Action actually got them to make this 1.1 edition just for their magazine, which I think is really quite cool to have the magazines involved in the PD scene and getting new titles, or at least updates, being made to these games. Now you actually get some limited control over your tank. You can move it back and forth as long as the ground is relatively flat. And there are a whole bunch of extra options that you can enable and mess around with, like having different types of landscapes, being able to turn the wind on and off, and even having additional objects that will change how the game plays. I mean, just look what all those pushers, pullers, and fans do to this shot. This is one of those games you can just mess around with and have a lot of fun in a party setting. But it's also the last one for Amiga Action. So let's move on to our last magazine for this episode, which is the one for Amiga with its single cover disc, which amazingly gives us a menu. Oh, that's so amazing after Amiga Action. And we've got Pegasus and Infiltrator. So let's see if this Pegasus demo is the same as what we've already seen. And so far, outside of changing the name of the magazine, this is looking pretty similar. I really do hope this is something completely different, or we're just going to see the same game twice. And that's not fun, is it? Ooh, now this is a bit more impressive than what we saw before. We've got music, and it's a shoot 'em up. And I guess that we're currently flying on the game's namesake, the Pegasus. Now it took a few runs to realise that those gems that you've been collecting are actually useful in this level. It might have been useful before, but I never worked it out then. But now, if you hit spacebar when you've got 10 gems, you'll get the wave shot, which is really quite useful in taking out some of those bigger baddies. So it's quite cool that there is an upgrade system for your firepower. Now I don't know if there was something similar in those ground-based levels. I might have to go back and check, or maybe even check out the whole game, because actually this seems pretty cool. As once again we've got lots of parallax scrolling going on, there's lots of things on screen, and it's actually a pretty decent looking title for the Amiga. It's also got a pretty decent track for the music, and it's one that I've actually heard in a number of compilations, but never actually seen the game that it was associated with. So it's actually nice to be able to put a game to a bit of music. Like the last time we saw this demo, it's not the longest that you'll ever play, but it is pretty cool and gives you a good idea of what the game is going to be like. Well, I assume anyway, I've never played the whole game. So I think it might be time to move on to our next and final demo of the day, which is Infiltrator, or at least that's its working title anyway. Now let me just point something out for the record. That text screen says that this is an easy level for you to get to grips with. This is not an easy level, as when you die, and you will die a lot, it sends you right back to that text screen, and you have to do everything again. There's no lives in this game, or at least in this demo, at all. It's also quite easy for you to mess up and get yourself stuck, so you have to kill yourself to start again. This feels like what you would get if Metroid was level based and you added in a good dash of Rick Dangerous, as you have lots of puzzle solving and large monsters to kill to be able to finish the level, but there's also plenty of instant deaths and lots of trial and error if you're going to make it to the end. And when this game did finally come out, it was named Orc, and this actually ended up being the second level in the game. And amazingly, for it still being such an early level, they had to make it easier by removing some of the death pits. It's an interesting looking and playing game, as if you find fuel, you get to fly around. But it is quite limited, so don't expect to fly around the whole level, and it's also possible to land if you want to conserve it. But it's also possible you'll get yourself stuck by using it. This game really does lean into that trial and error style gameplay here. But it has done what a demo is meant to do, and that is intrigue me enough that I'll have to give it a go. And with that, we've seen everything we're going to see out of these discs, so all that's left now is to rate them and find out who's the winner. It was a close one, but I think third place has to go to the one for Amiga. Just 2 demos wasn't enough, and more so when one of them really did feel a bit unfinished. In second place, I've put Amiga Power. Not because of the main game demo, but because of those PD games. They were really quite fun. Which means Amiga Action takes the top spot. The lack of a menu really hurt, but that second disc was the real star of the show. And Amiga Tanks really did take it over the edge. And there we have it. Do you agree with me, or do you think I got it wrong? Let me know down in the comments. And also let me know if there's a year, month and magazine you think I should check out. And until next time, I was the Goldfish, that was September 1991, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thank you for watching Cover Disc Face Off. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you should be able to find 2 other videos on the screen right now. Or you might even want to subscribe, or even ring that bell icon, because that's what I've been told that you need to do. So until next time, thank you and goodbye.